The boundary between digital folklore and physical reality is often believed to be distinct and impenetrable. We assume that the frightening stories told around the glow of a computer screen cannot reach out and draw blood in the real world. However, this assumption was violently shattered on a spring morning in Wisconsin when a fictional boogeyman drove two children to commit an unthinkable act. The case we are examining today forces us to look into the dark corners of the internet and the fragile minds of the youth who inhabit it. It is a story of obsession and delusion, and a tragedy that left a community forever changed as they grappled with a crime that defied all logical explanation. The setting for this tragedy was the quiet suburb of Waukesha, Wisconsin, located just west of Milwaukee. It is the kind of place where neighbors know each other, and children play outside with a sense of safety that borders on complacency. The date was May 31st in the year 2014, a Saturday that promised the start of a carefree summer. The sun was shining through the dense canopy of trees in the local parks, and families were enjoying the weekend. But within the minds of two 12-year-old girls, a dark plan was already in motion. They were not planning a game of tag or a trip to the mall, but rather a ritualistic sacrifice intended to appease a monster. The central figures in this harrowing tale are Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weier, who were both 12 years old at the time of the incident. To the outside observer, they appeared to be typical preteens, navigating the awkward transition from childhood to adolescence. They enjoyed sleepovers and sharing stories and spending time on the internet. However, their friendship was forged in a shared obsession that went far beyond innocent fascination. They had become consumed by the lore of a character known as the Slender Man. This entity was not a ghost from ancient history, but a modern creation born from an online forum. Yet to Morgan and Anissa, he was as real as the air they breathed. To understand the motive, we must understand the monster. The Slender Man originated on the Something Awful forums in the year 2009, created by a user named Eric Knudsen under the alias Victor Search. He was depicted as an unnaturally tall and thin figure, with a blank white face wearing a black suit. The lore described him as a stalker of children who could cause memory loss and paranoia in coughs. While the internet viewed him as a spooky creative writing project, Morgan and Anissa viewed him as a supreme authority. They believed he lived in a mansion in the Nicolet National Forest and that they needed to prove their worth to live with him. The third child involved in this tragedy was Payton Leutner, who was also 12 years old and a friend of the two girls. Payton was described by those who knew her as kind and trusting and full of life. She had been friends with Morgan for years and had no reason to suspect that her best friend was harboring violent intentions. Payton was the unsuspecting victim chosen by Morgan and Anissa to be their sacrifice. In their delusion, the girls believed that killing Payton was the only way to become proxies for the Slender Man. They believed this act would grant them protection and a home in his secluded forest mansion. The girls had been planning the attack for months. They used code words to discuss their lethal plot on the school bus and during playtime. Initially, they considered attacking Payton in her sleep or in a bathroom, but they eventually decided on a park setting. The opportunity arose during a birthday sleepover at the Geyser home on the night of May 30th. The three girls celebrated Morgan turning 12 with roller skating and pizza and games. To Payton, it was a celebration of friendship, but to Morgan and Anissa, it was the final night before their transition into a darker world. On the morning of May 31st, the three girls woke up and eventually made their way to David's Park. The atmosphere was deceptively normal as they walked through the suburban streets. Morgan and Anissa were carrying a backpack that contained the weapon, which was a kitchen knife taken from the Geyser home. They led Payton into a wooded area of the park, under the pretense of playing a game of hide and seek. The location was secluded enough to offer them privacy, but close enough to civilization that the sounds of the weekend traffic were still audible. The tension was palpable only to the two conspirators. Once they were deep within the trees, the game began, but the rules had changed. Anissa urged Morgan to commit the act, telling her to go ballistic and lose control. In a moment of sheer horror, Morgan attacked Payton with the kitchen knife. The violence was sudden and brutal. Payton was stabbed 19 times in her arms and legs and torso. The attack pierced her liver and stomach and came within a millimeter of a major artery near her heart. The sheer ferocity of the assault was startling given the age of the attackers and the friendship they supposedly shared with the victim. After the attack, Morgan and Anissa told Payton to lie down and be quiet, claiming they would go get help. Instead, they gathered their belongings and fled the scene, leaving their friend bleeding on the forest floor. They began their long trek toward the Nicolet National Forest, which was hundreds of miles away in northern Wisconsin. They believed the Slender Man would welcome them there. Meanwhile, Payton was left fighting for her life. Despite her critical injuries, she summoned an incredible amount of strength and the will to survive. She managed to drag herself out of the woods and onto a nearby sidewalk. It was a cyclist named Weier who found Payton lying on the edge of the road. He initially thought she was a discarded object until he saw her moving. When he approached, he saw the extent of her injuries and immediately called emergency services. Payton was barely conscious, but she was able to tell the cyclist who had attacked her. She whispered that her best friend had done this. This crucial piece of information allowed law enforcement to immediately identify the suspects. Police and paramedics arrived swiftly, and Payton was rushed to the hospital for emergency surgery. While surgeons fought to save the life of Payton Leutner, a manhunt began for Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weier. Law enforcement officers from Waukesha and the surrounding areas mobilized quickly. They knew the girls were on foot and likely had not traveled far. The police searched the local parks and streets and highways. The community was placed on high alert as the news of the stabbing spread. The idea that two 12-year-old girls were wandering the streets after attempting a murder was terrifying to the residents of the quiet suburb. Several hours later, a sheriff deputy spotted two girls walking along the frontage road of Interstate 94 near the city of Pewaukee. They were miles away from the crime scene, but nowhere near the forest they sought. When the officer approached them, they did not run or fight. They were tired and disheveled. In their backpack, the police found the knife used in the attack, as well as blood-stained clothing. The girls were taken into custody without incident. Their journey to the fictional mansion had ended on the side of a concrete highway. The interrogation tapes of Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weier provide a chilling glimpse into their mental states. When detectives questioned Morgan, she appeared detached and almost devoid of emotion. She sat in the interrogation room and calmly explained her belief in the Slender Man. She told the detectives that she had to kill Payton to save her own family from the wrath of the entity. She described the stabbing with a clinical precision that disturbed the seasoned investigators. There were no tears and no immediate signs of remorse, only a matter-of-fact recounting of the events. Anissa Weier displayed a different demeanor during her interrogation, but her story aligned perfectly with Morgan. She explained that she had introduced Morgan to the legend of the Slender Man, and that they had planned the attack together. Anissa admitted that she did not wield the knife, but she accepted her role in encouraging the act. She spoke of the Slender Man as a legitimate threat, and described his ability to teleport and read minds. It became clear to the detectives that this was not a prank gone wrong, but a shared delusion of dangerous proportions. The legal process that followed was complex and highly controversial due to the age of the defendants. Under Wisconsin law, anyone aged 10 or older charged with first-degree intentional homicide is automatically charged as an adult. This meant that Morgan and Anissa faced the possibility of decades in prison. Their defense attorneys argued that the girls should be tried in juvenile court, where the focus would be on rehabilitation rather than punishment. The prosecution argued that the premeditated nature of the crime and its brutality warranted adult charges. As the legal battles dragged on, the mental health of the girls became the central focus. Morgan Geyser was diagnosed with early-onset schizophrenia. Experts testified that she suffered from hallucinations and delusions, and that she truly believed the Slender Man was real. Her father also suffered from schizophrenia, which suggested a genetic component to her condition. Anissa Weier was diagnosed with a shared delusional disorder. Psychologists explained that she had adopted the delusions of Morgan due to their close bond and her own susceptibility. This dynamic is sometimes referred to as folie à deux. While the courts debated the fate of the attackers, Payton Leutner was on a long and painful road to recovery. She spent 6 days in the hospital and underwent multiple surgeries to repair the damage to her organs. The physical scars were extensive, but the emotional trauma was even deeper. She lived in fear that the Slender Man or her former friends would come back to finish the job. She slept with scissors under her pillow for protection and struggled to trust anyone. Her childhood had been stolen and replaced with a nightmare. The case sparked a global conversation about the influence of the internet on children. Parents were horrified to learn that a horror story from a website could inspire such violence. Schools and libraries began blocking access to creepypasta websites and forums. The media dubbed the incident the Slender Man stabbing, and it became a cautionary tale for the digital age. It raised questions about the responsibility of content creators and the ability of children to distinguish between fantasy and reality. The blurred line had proven to be deadly. In the courtroom, the competency of the girls to stand trial was challenged repeatedly. There were periods where Morgan was found incompetent and was sent to a state mental hospital to receive treatment and medication. It took years of therapy and medication to stabilize her condition to the point where she could understand the legal proceedings. During this time, the families of all 3 girls suffered immensely. The parents of the attackers had to reconcile their love for their children with the horror of their actions. The parents of the victim had to watch their daughter suffer while seeking justice. Eventually, plea deals were reached for both defendants to avoid a trial. In August of the year 2017, Anissa Weier pleaded guilty to being a party to attempted second-degree intentional homicide. However, she was found not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. This legal distinction meant that she would not go to prison, but would instead be committed to a state mental health facility. The jury agreed that she was not in her right mind at the time of the crime and needed treatment rather than incarceration. Morgan Geyser accepted a similar plea deal in October of the year 2017. She pleaded guilty to attempted first-degree intentional homicide, but was also found not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. The court recognized that her untreated schizophrenia was the driving force behind the attack. She was sentenced to 40 years of institutional supervision, which meant she would remain in a mental health facility for an indefinite period, potentially for the rest of her life, depending on her progress. The sentencing hearings were emotional for everyone involved. Payton Leutner did not attend the hearings in person, but sent a letter describing the impact the crime had on her life. She wrote about her physical pain and her fear, and her loss of innocence. The judge emphasized the need to protect the public, while also providing the girls with the help they clearly needed. Anissa was sentenced to 25 years under the supervision of the state psychiatric system. The sentences reflected the gravity of the crime and the tragic circumstances of the perpetrators. In the years following the sentencing, Anissa Weier responded well to treatment. She participated in therapy and showed remorse for her actions. In the year 2021, a judge granted her request for conditional release. She was released from the mental health facility under strict conditions. She was required to live with her father and wear a GPS monitor and receive ongoing psychiatric care. She was also prohibited from using the internet or contacting the victim or Morgan Geyser. Her release was met with mixed reactions from the public. Morgan Geyser remains in institutional care. Her condition is considered more severe, and her path to release is far more uncertain. She has made progress, but she has also had setbacks during her time in the facility. She continues to receive treatment for her schizophrenia. Her case serves as a stark reminder of the importance of early intervention in mental health issues. If her condition had been diagnosed and treated sooner, the tragedy might have been prevented. She remains a tragic figure trapped between her illness and her actions. Payton Leutner has grown into a young woman who refuses to be defined solely by the attack. In a televised interview in the year 2019, she spoke publicly for the first time. She displayed a remarkable amount of resilience and maturity. She expressed that she has come to accept her scars as a part of who she is. She is currently attending college and trying to live a normal life. She has distanced herself from the darkness of that day and focuses on her future. Her survival is the true miracle of this story. The legacy of the Slender Man case is multifaceted. It changed the way we view internet culture and the safety of our children online. It brought the issue of childhood mental illness into the spotlight and highlighted the need for better resources and awareness. It also forced the legal system to grapple with the difficult question of how to handle children who commit violent crimes due to mental illness. The case remains a subject of study for psychologists and criminologists and legal experts around the world. The fictional character of the Slender Man has faded somewhat from the forefront of internet culture, but he has not disappeared. The character has been the subject of movies and documentaries and video games. However, the real horror is not the monster in the suit, but the potential for violence that lies within the human mind. The tragedy in Waukesha showed us that monsters do not need to be real to cause real destruction. They only need to be believed in. As we reflect on this case, we are left with a sense of unease. We want to believe that our children are safe and that they know the difference between a story and the truth. But the story of Morgan and Anissa and Payton challenges that comfort. It reminds us to be vigilant and to listen to our children and to understand the worlds they inhabit both online and offline. The woods of Waukesha are quiet now, but the echoes of that day still resonate. The investigation into the Slender Man case was not a whodunit in the traditional sense. We knew who held the knife and who planned the attack. The true investigation was an inquiry into the human psyche and the power of belief. It was a journey into a shared madness that nearly cost a young girl her life. As we close this docket, we must remember that the most terrifying mysteries are often the ones that unfold in plain sight within the minds of those we think we know best.